What is up, Ask Us Why Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Vessels Podcast, brought to you by Ask Us Why and Ask Us Where Christian Apparel. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And if you've never been with us before, we just want to say what's up. We hope you guys love this podcast, and we hope that you guys join the fam. And if you've never been with us before, this podcast is basically centered around me and my good friends Christian, Connor, and Allie, where we host a round table style discussion talking about everything faith and how to navigate living in the crazy world that we live in from a biblical perspective and a biblical worldview. We hope you guys love this podcast. If you do, we'd love it if you shared it or if you left a review for us. It really helps with getting the content to more people that we can impact. And if you want to support us in other ways, you can always head to our shop and buy something from there at askuswhyshop.com. We love you guys, and let's jump right into this episode. What is up, brothers and sisters? We are live, back in the lion's den. Back at it again with my good friends Christian, Connor, and Allie, who I just tricked into thinking I was doing a different intro. But I wasn't.
It was kind of different, though.
It was a little bit.
How was it different?
You said brothers and sisters. I don't know if you normally
I don't know
say
if you've
that.
ever said that.
Really?
Yeah. You go, what's up?
Ask us why,
Ask
fam.
us why, fam, or Podcast Nation. You say something like that.
Oh.
Brothers and sisters.
We should start using the hashtag
Christ.
AskUsNation. Because I put that in our
Okay.
Instagram
In the bio.
and I say that sometimes. The Ask Us Nation. I sometimes say Ask Us Why Nation. Wait.
Ask Wation.
Ask us why.
I had the idea for Ask Us Warriors, but I cringed once I said it. I was like, that's definitely
Shut it
something
down.
that like a 60-year-old Pentecostal.
They're gonna think this is sick.
Harley Davidson guy would say. Yeah.
Everyone,
You part of the Ask Us Warriors? Yeah, I'm a day oneer, bro.
day oneer.
So we're not doing that.
As you can tell,
But Ask
we are
Us
very
Nation-
in touch with the youths.
Yeah. We
Those
know what the youth like.
Youths. No,
Whippersnappers.
we're Ask Us Nation though, so that'll be our thing.
Okay.
I feel like I said brothers and sisters though.
No,
No.
I never said that.
Where we all go.
I
Whatever.
don't think so.
No.
Whatever. I say Ask Us Why Nation in the intro of the podcast now, the one that I pre-record. Anyways, point is, what's the vine of the day?
Is that empty?
What?
Never heard that one.
You don't
No.
know. And then she throws it in the hallway.
Do it. Well, if there like requires action, I feel like you have to do the action along with it.
Is that a weed? I'm calling the police. 911, what's your emergency?
In the microwave.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember that one.
Chris, is that a weed?
No, this is a crayon.
The police!
911, what's your emergency?
I should just clip in the vine whenever you guys say it into the video.
You know what Vine was like so popular? But it wasn't even that. Remember the lawnmower that flew in the air? It would be like, and it's like flying, and they would just put different music on it. Or it's like sail.
Hold on, this is Vine number 2 of the day.
Do you remember that
How
cat?
many are we doing?
I guess.
I thought we were just doing
Remember
one.
that cat
no,
that was
she's just
like
gone.
walking, and then he looks and was like sail,
The one that like he walks on the ledge.
and he's like, "Meow."
See the one on the beach with the umbrellas, and they start like because it's really
It's like
windy.
Oh.
run.
Run.
That was a good one. You're gonna have to clip a lot of these.
A
Oh
potato
no.
flew around my room before you came. Excuse the mess it made. And then when she throws the
no.
doll, it's like,
SVI or what's it called? CSI Special Victims Unit or something like that.
Law and Order, SVU.
Yeah.
Special
Law and
Victims
Order, it's like,
Unit.
"Du-du-du, du-du-du."
Yeah, that sounded like the ESPN.
Oh, that is
ESPN. SVU, Special Victims Unit.
It was definitely ESPN.
That's funny. Well, how's your guys' Sunday going? You guys having a good Sunday?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
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 The weather's is nice.
Yeah.
I'm liking it.
Connor, do
It's
you have
not
anything you'd like
super
to say?
hot.
I like it
It's
right
not
now.
super hot
this
yet.
week it's gonna be cheeks.
Yeah, it does get up to like
Yeah.
95.
Gross.
And then like for whatever reason, like next Tuesday, like 2 Tuesdays out, the high is 71.
Thank the Lord. God is real.
This is proof.
God is real.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, in other recent news, which is not so recent, but I had to bring it up because we wouldn't be like culturally relevant if we didn't talk about the greatest night in television history,
Oh, okay.
which was actually right after we were finished recording last week.
Yeah.
So, but this is going to come out 2 weeks past it. So we're going to be so irrelevant. But Will Smith, Chris Rock.
You could say it was something happened that just rocked the whole world.
That was bad. That was pretty bad. What did Chris Rock
It
wake up
came
with?
out of nowhere.
What?
He was unwilling.
What?
He got
What did?
smacked.
Hey, what did Chris Rock wake up with in the morning?
A rock on his head. What's the joke? I don't get it.
Fresh Prince.
Oh.
Get
Oh
it?
God.
That was good.
Okay.
Do you actually get it though, or are you just
yeah,
like
Fresh Prince. Fresh Prince.
okay?
Yeah.
You just so for those that weren't watching, you just said Fresh Prince twice. Yeah, Fresh Prince. Fresh Prince. I get it.
Yeah, no, I got it. Next
Which means you guys
question,
need
please.
to watch the video. What are you doing just listening? Who listens these days only? You guys got to be in the room with us so that I can just zoom in on Connor and Christian and Allie's faces when I think it's necessary to add value and experience to the podcast. Anyways, yeah, crazy night. I think the world is more on like the side of that's not cool any like now. It seemed like at first there was a lot of division. I don't know. Did you guys see?
I actually didn't even know there was two sides of the spectrum. That like one was like, oh, that was mean, and one was like, that's okay.
Well, on the one side, it was they make the claim that Chris Rock made a joke about Jada's like health condition,
Right.
but it's a skin condition, and she shaved her head way before that was even like a thing. And so she does it because it's like a style for her. That's what she likes.
Yeah.
But like people are saying that, oh, he made fun of her hair and her like health issue. So Will felt the need to go defend her, go on stage. And so that's where people are justifying it, saying, oh, he was going and defending his wife and his family and like that's honorable. But then you got the other side where it's like violence is never an answer. Like talk to him backstage if it's a big deal about it. Like make something after. But like then after that, after slapping him on stage, he gets an award, winning an Oscar, and then gives a speech and gets a standing ovation. So like that's the harder part. It's like what is the world? Like, what does that say about the
Maybe
world?
that's just how we should all
Spineless.
start treating people that we disagree with.
Right?
Slap them in the face.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to.
That's what I do with Remy whenever I disagree.
Makes me think of the is it the Batman and Robin meme where Batman always slaps him across the face? Like stupid. That is the only necessary course of action. There's no other option.
Yeah.
So I mean it makes sense.
Who uses words anymore? Not me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but that's kind of hard. But it's also the world's like it's not like
Speaking
a
of worldly news.
Allie had to just do it. She had to do it. Say it. Don't
What's up with Hillsong? Am I right?
What is up with Hillsong?
Oh my
gosh.
I feel like we're a room full of drama. Just
Drama.
what's the latest heat?
Am I the drama?
Pouring the tea.
Am I the drama? I can't be the drama. Am I?
Am
Could
I?
I?
Could I? Anywho.
Okay.
That's it. We
Awkward
just
and
wanted
long
to say
Is that
that.
another Vine reference?
Well, no.
Sure. So
You remember Evil
Nope.
Kermit? When he had like the hood on the Kermit, the frog guy?
yeah.
Okay. Anywho, Hillsong.
So we're talking about Hillsong today, which is much different than what we normally would talk about because it's not like in the Bible. Hillsong's not in the Bible, I don't think.
Right.
Right? They're not in the Bible.
Right. It
Someone
does
wanna
talk about
fact check us?
hills, but
And songs.
yeah, but not together.
Oh, what if Hillsong is in the Bible? I'm gonna start a church called Hillsong.
That's honestly, that seems like a missed opportunity. I don't know why someone hasn't done that. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Now we got some heat in the news right now because you guys know what's going down? Does anyone got any idea?
A
I
little
got
bit of
a
an
little bit
idea.
of
Who wants to
grasp.
who wants to share?
Grasp.
Who wants to enlighten those who don't know what's going on with Hillsong about what's happening with Hillsong right now?
I've been voluntold. Um, so I think that there's obviously been some stuff for, about over a year with, the stuff in the New York City location with the Carl Lentz guy. And so that had also been a big deal. But with a lot of things, I feel like, if it's not something that breaks the internet, it's like, well, we're over it in a couple weeks and then we'll move on, which is, not good. But I think it was it the 23rd of March that the main pastor, global pastor, Brian Houston, he technically resigned from the leadership of the Sydney campus, I believe is like the main one. And I think it comes after some people had accused him of, inappropriate. I think one was a text message and something else, like in a hotel room at like a conference or something for Hillsong. And obviously I don't know all of the details, but it's crazy because that church, that brand is massive, obviously.
100 million
yeah.
gross revenue.
It's crazy.
Just Hillsong, like the worship team.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they bring in.
Yeah.
That's not even the church.
Crazy.
Wow.
But and then I also heard that there's been multiple of their like global locations that have kind of been branching out from the Hillsong, like being part of a Hillsong church as a whole, and creating their own church now. And I think the same thing happened with the Phoenix Hillsong in the past couple days. Is his name Terry Christ?
Yep.
So they're going to start doing their own thing now because of everything that's happened. I don't think it's just because of these, recent things, but from, a snowball of things that have happened in, the Hillsong church. But that's what I know of it.
Anything else you guys have tea on?
It's basically, there was a documentary that came out on Discover Plus.
Yeah.
That is highlighting all of the terrible things that the Hillsong Church has done, painting a narrative around what has happened and how it's bad. I haven't seen the documentary. I know that it exists. I know that it's...
Have you guys watched it?
Mm-hmm.
I have.
I've heard some of it.
I watched it.
What are your opinions on the documentary?
Dude, I got so many thoughts about this thing. So many thoughts.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to kind of sum that up before going into thoughts. Within the last like 2-3 weeks, it's been like heavy with like the downfall of it, like absolute 180 for everything. It wasn't just a gradually things kind of were happening. Things were happening behind the scenes, but once everything was revealed, everything just kind of hit. And that's what's interesting is that Brian Houston stepped down and like resigned from being like, I think they would say like spiritual CEO is what they like called him kind of.
Yes, I did hear that.
As like the term for him being like the global leader for the church. He stepped down from being that position on the 23rd, and the docuseries came out the 24th, which, I mean, like, I'm not going to assume, but when you put the pieces together, it probably sounds like, all right, this is about to go out. Do you really want to have to deal with all the media and press if you're still at the front of the church for this kind of stuff? Which kind of sucks because it put their other global leader on like blast for it, and he's been the one that has to respond to like everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, Terry Christ, I think it's how you say his last name. I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. It could be Christ. I don't know. It's Christ. But he, I don't know the actual situation. It sounded like he said that they shut down their 6 locations that he had within the valley. But I don't think that means that like the churches don't exist anymore. I think it just means that they're no longer affiliated with Hillsong.
Yeah.
And then the church pastor from Atlanta also not resigned, but like disconnected himself with the Hillsong Church as well. And now there are like that alone is already 7 out of the 18 locations that they have in America, which are gone. Mm-hmm. So almost half of the churches that they had are now disconnected from them, which is crazy. And all of it just seems to be going downhill. And there's just a lot of talk on the streets about kind of what's been going on, which is really unfortunate because I know a lot of people that are either at Hillsong College or have gone to one of the Hillsong churches that when they watch like a series like this, like it's news to them. You know what I'm saying? It's not like everybody that's been in the Hillsong church is like, oh, shoot, it's coming to the surface now. Like I thought that they said that they were keeping this under wraps. It's not like this is like a cult or something where they've like, you know, all of them know about these things. So that sucks. Also having to witness that from inside the church. Because if that were to happen,
Well, let's
our
clarify a little bit though. What did Hillsong do? Because right now we're just hearing allegations of cheating from a head pastor or spiritual CEO.
Yeah.
So what did they do?
Yeah. So the biggest the biggest thing about this docuseries is it's formulated to really attack Carl Lentz and then Brian Houston. And like the first like 20 minutes is really to go after their methodology of how they grew and how they operate and structure, which is very much similar to how a business would structure itself and how they continue to do like influencer marketing by having, you know, like really famous people come and be a part of their church and how they grow and how they get people excited. But they talked about some of the hurt that caused because they're known for having the signs out front that say, welcome home, you know, like you belong here and all that kind of stuff. But I still, and also for anyone listening, like take this with a grain of salt because we don't know what is fully true and what's not, because obviously we're hearing some of the news, but things could change. And so we're not like married to this idea of whatever it is, but like this is just a response to what I've seen. And I do believe this, but apparently as the New York location was growing and getting really popular, people were like lining up to get into this church, but it was also because celebrities were showing up. And so when someone like Justin Bieber would show up to the New York City campus, then all of a sudden word spreads about that. And now people are going, not just because they're looking to experience God, but they're like, oh, Justin Bieber might be here. So they started getting really long lines. And that's not to assume everyone's intentions behind going to church.
And it's
I'm
also
sure.
not to assume that that's Justin Bieber's fault. You know, that's just something that happens.
Right. That just like naturally will happen. And so, but what would happen is that they would get really long lines outside of people waiting, but they were like seating all of those like wealthy, rich people at the front and giving them reserved seats. And they were kicking other people out that wanted to come into church and saying like, you can't come in anymore. And it was like, we're too packed. We have like too much room and stuff like that. But they were prioritizing making sure all of those like wealthier people would get into the front, which is directly tied to what Jewish people would do in the synagogues back during the like, you know, first century when James writes about, I believe it's James, right? That talked about favoritism and how, you know, giving the seats to the rich and then making the poor stand in the back. Like God hates that, despises that. So regardless, the first 20 minutes was really trying to just kind of tackle and talk about that. But then a big chunk of it was just really diving into Carl Lentz. And what's frustrating is that, yes, Carl Lentz represents Hillsong in a lot of different ways, naturally because of his position of leadership, but also like that doesn't speak on behalf of all the other amazing people that are in Hillsong that really do have good hearts and are really trying to do more for the kingdom. So that sucks. And that's another thing I'll talk about later about my take on it. But they really highlighted who Carl Lentz was and what he did. So Carl Lentz was the pastor for, I believe, the New York campus for a while. If not, it was the LA. I never can get that straight. I don't know if he did both. But he grew in popularity like crazy. He became like the celebrity pastor. He was the icon that kind of set the standard for so many different pastors for, you know, how they dress and how they, you know, preachers and sneakers started because of it, with a lot of stuff like that. And I don't know if you guys know who Preachers and Sneakers is. Do you guys know who that is? Mm-hmm. Just a guy that started posting pictures of like preachers wearing like $500 shoes and stuff. And it wasn't for him like to destroy their like reputation or whatever. It was just like something silly he did. But he said that he grew to 200,000 followers in 1 week after he started posting about it, which is ridiculous. Like imagine waking up the next day and you have like 50,000 followers in your account because you posted one photo. But the point is that Carl Lentz really set the stage for this idea of like Hillsong being this fun, pop culture relevant, like exciting atmosphere that people would want to be a part of. And so he became like a traveling pastor and was really growing his influence for a while, but then obviously had a huge downfall. I believe it was 2020. I don't think it was 2021. It might have been 2021. But either way, it was in the last couple of years that it came out that he was having an affair with his wife, with this other person. And when news had come out about that, he had already technically posted about it before news channels and like articles and journalists could get to it and report about it outside of him. So he was kind of the first, because what happened was the church found out about it. And so because he found out that the church found out, he said, I need to make my way to like announce this first. And so he announced it, and then basically announced that he was like needing to take a step back. Technically Brian Houston like fired him, but because of that, the reputation became really tainted against Hillsong, because he was like the pioneer of it. I know Brian Houston's been the pioneer of it since I think the 80s, since they like really started, but it was in this last like, you know, decade or so that Carl Lentz really was pushing, because he's friends with Justin Bieber. You had people like Kendall Jenner and Kevin Durant like showing up to services, and like Carl Lentz hanging out with these people. And so you're like, who is this guy that is just making his way into this massive world in Hollywood that's like preaching Jesus? Like, what is he doing? Like, he just seems so cool. And so when the news came out about this, everyone was just absolutely destroyed. But because of that, a lot of other allegations started to come out. Words started to like, people built confidence to come and say something about whatever had happened to them in their experience with church. And so pretty much since then, because of all the junk that's been happening within Hillsong and these people, obviously the docuseries like collected all that information and has formulated this, you know, 3-part series, about an hour each episode, just kind of going after Hillsong to pretty much tear them down. Like when you look at it and you look at how like it's formulated, like when you create a story like this, like you're trying to tell a story. And so there's intention behind what message you're trying to get across. Right. And so clearly, like they tried to find people that were like non-biased to some degree, being like, yo, like I think they're a good guy, but like they say this. If they had someone that was like, I think he's good, like he makes mistakes, you know, like it happens to people and stuff, like they wouldn't put that in the video. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of perspective does not exist in this. Like the whole purpose is for them to just tear down Hillsong. And so because of the docuseries, because Brian Houston stepped down, because of Carl Lentz, now Hillsong is in shambles for the most part. Which really, really sucks, because I have a lot of friends that are even at Hillsong College, and for them, they're like, yeah, dude, this freaking sucks. But the hard part is that, like, for them, you know, how much of their identity is in Hillsong, and that being like their life, versus, hey, this is a medium by which I'm going to grow in my relationship with Jesus. It doesn't have to just be Hillsong, it can be other places, but this is where my community is, all those kind of things. And so that can be really tough. But yeah, just there's so much news around it. But the reason like why like we need to talk about it is, well, not that we need to, but that I think it's important to talk about is understanding the impact this has on the church and its reputation with the world.
Right.
Because Hillsong clearly has been a leader in this, like right next to like Bethel, right next to obviously like I would say Transformation Church is another huge one now, but they're not international like Hillsong is. Hillsong's obviously the biggest of them all. Bethel's pretty big too. They're all over the place. Elevation is another really big one. So like these are like the leaders for the church and this industry. Industry, so to say. And when Hillsong, who's like the giant, that would be like seeing Google or Apple just like crumble to the ground because of like
the Google of Christianity. I'm so dead. That's so funny.
Like that's the perspective though, is like these guys are the giants when it comes to the faith, because they're the ones that have been doing it for so long. They're leading it. Like we were talking about, they grossed $100 million a year just from Hillsong the band. That's how Hillsong started. Hillsong was actually a different church. It had a different name, and the band Hillsong came to be, and they were doing really, really well with that. And so they adopted the name Hillsong for the church, but then the band is what took off. And so they're doing concerts and conferences and events, but like the worship music is what kept them relevant, because that was how they connected with people. Right. So like, I think they said that, like they always kind of formulated the music to whatever was most popular in the day to kind of like match that tone. And so nowadays, if you listen, a lot of the stuff kind of sounds like Coldplay, like the way that they kind of like, you know, do that. But one of the bigger allegations against like Hillsong as well is that the way that they structure music isn't always necessarily for you to just worship God, but they like want to connect, because we know music's powerful, but they want to connect with you emotionally to invoke an emotional response, because then that creates more of an experience for the person. But that's where things can get really messy and into like a really big gray area, because it's like, are you experiencing God, or is this you just like your heart's like strings are being like, you know, strung the right way, and you're just feeling it because of the words that they're saying and because of the way that they build to the climax of the song and the chorus and those kind of things. And so a lot of people felt that things were like either over spiritualized, or that like they weren't actually like really worshiping, that they were just kind of like singing and feeling all these things. Hillsong's been known since the beginning as like a prosperity gospel type church. Brian Houston was actually like huge. Yeah. So when they first started back in like the 80s, Brian came out with a book, and a lot of it talked about prosperity and about being rich and those kind of things. Now, they don't talk about that as much now, but like they have definitely like leaned into the middle, where they really more on like feel good messages, where they want you to like walk out of each message feeling like pumped and amped and like, let's go take on the world for Christ. Like, let's do it. And like, I'm not like fully opposed to feeling those things, but when it compromises on scripture and you stay away from the harder topics, and you don't talk about things like you need to repent or the harder topics of scripture,
right,
that's where it can get really challenging for like doing a heart check on like the church and like what their intentions are behind it.
Just really quick, because I
Yeah.
feel like we got away from it. I want to come back to the affair thing.
Yeah.
Because I do have an opinion on that.
Yeah.
I've only been to Hillsong like 5 or 6 times. At the downtown Phoenix location, super cool. Building's pretty, stained glass windows, love to see it. But when that whole thing came out, I think what was like, obviously when sin makes itself like known or like seen, like there's countless times in history where it's like everyone's like, oh my gosh, that is so crazy that happened. And it's like, I hope that never stops happening, where we all feel shook by that.
Right.
Like that's a good thing that I want to acknowledge. Everyone saw that and was like, what? That's good.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't be like, oh, well, duh, the pastor cheated. Like, who wouldn't? Like, yeah, we should be brokenhearted about that. We should be praying for him. We should be upset. You should feel those emotions, because that's the correct way to feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't ever be like, well, don't be upset with him. Like, I would be like, well, that makes sense that you're upset because he did something very, very wrong.
Yeah.
Not just by my standard, but by the Bible standard. But more so, I think something, I talked about this with Connor today too. The thing is, like, regardless of your title among the church, like CEO of spiritualness, whatever, head pastor, lead pastor, collect the tithes, whatever you do, or just a believer. Something that Connor once said that like rocked my world. He said like temptation never goes away. I thought that was such a profound statement, just because I think, especially in today's culture, like even talking about like pornography and things like that, like you can put up limits, throw away Instagram, throw away your phone, get a flip phone. You still have to walk outside. You still have to go to work. You still have to interact with females, males, whatever. And temptation's all around you. Even if you're blind, there's still temptation. Like it's just like a profound statement to make. But I would like to make that even over this thing that happened. Like he might have been the head, whatever. But temptation found him probably at a weak moment, and he acted on it. And yes, we should be shocked, but at the same time, that is literally proof of the reason of why we need Jesus. Like that is it. Like there's no part of me that's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You're telling me big pastor dude committed what? Like that's no, it's not, because he's a human being. But I think we've done something wrong to him by putting him so high on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what matters more. And Connor really can talk more into that than I can, about like, that's the church's issue there. Yeah. Like you put him so high up there. So when he fell hard, and you all fell with him a little bit. And that shouldn't be how that works. You should be able to all stand firm, and when he falls, you catch him or help him get back up. There shouldn't be this like you all get hurt and him falling because he's so high up there. But I just wanted to speak that out for like anyone who does know the pastor, because I don't want to offend anyone too. Like obviously we're not coming at this guy. We're just stating what we know to be true or things we've heard. But just that was my take on it, was I was kind of like, that's really sad. And like obviously shocked me, but it's more so like he is still human. Like he does still face temptation, as does every single one of us in this room. And it found him. Like even Jesus was tempted. We've talked about that many times. So anyhow, that was just like the church's fault that Connor can probably talk about with like holding people high up there.
Yeah, I think obviously, just for clarification's sake, like we're not excusing anything that was done that was wrong. Like from Carl Lentz or Brian Houston or anybody else like in the board of elders from the Hillsong Church or anything affiliated with that. Like, and just in general, like you can't protect the company over like the victim, like especially when stuff happens like that. And that's, I think, where a lot of those problems stemmed is sometimes not even churches, but like just companies in general, like want to protect their image more than, protect the people who are actually being, attacked in a way or whatever. But there's no excuse for the actions that, men or women in positions of power like have. Like they have consequences to their actions now. And I think, those will be had, but at the same time, we have to look at ourselves as followers of Christ and as people who, intentionally or unintentionally like put those people on those pedestals, like in big churches, in, the things that we listen to, the sermons that we watch on YouTube, the Instagrams that we follow. Like, I think many people have said it, but like charisma can never like be at the top of character. And like we always have to understand that those two things don't necessarily equal each other. And you can have, a pastor, a leader of a church, like obviously the perfect example is Jesus. Like his character was flawless, but at the same time he was very charismatic. Like he knew how to talk to people, how to how to draw a crowd. But
draw a cloud.
He knew how to. He was a great artist.
He was the Picasso.
I mean, he did create the world. So, I mean,
yeah. But anyways, like I think that's where, foundationally these things can happen, and it's the biggest thing is like how long until we like learn our lesson, especially as the church. Like these things happen way too often, and obviously I think there's a lot of things that, in our age of social media that are, exploded a little more than they would have if these things were to happen like, a decade ago or, in a different time period. But at the same time, it's like, it's not an excuse. Like because we like the way these people look, because we like the way that they talk or the way that they make us feel with these things, the way that they can relate to culture, all of these things, like that doesn't excuse their actions, and it doesn't also make them eligible for leadership like that. And I think if we're able to more accurately like think about who we put as, I don't want to say poster child, but that's how it is most of the time in these big churches, like and especially with accountability. I think we'll talk about that later too, but these things are so important, and sometimes we're just like, oh, he makes those sermons like makes me feel really good. Like he makes me connect with the passage or whatever. And it's like, okay, but is he being held accountable by the elders in that church? And is he being asked hard questions by people who know what's going on in his life and what he struggles with and all of these things? Right. And that's just something to live by as a Christian. Like you can't do church on your own. And when we put these people on a pedestal and when we allow them, excuse for their actions, especially like in the small things, like we've kind of built this on our own as well. And I say we, as not just Hillsong Church, Hillsong College, anything like that, but just like the Christian community in general. Like our hearts need to be checked, because like what are we pursuing? What are we helping grow, even if it's unintentionally?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you could put any person under that spotlight. Like you could put Carl Lentz, you could put me, you could put Brian Mueller for all I care. I don't like, you could put anybody under that. And if you examine their life and dig deep enough, you're going to find dirt on everybody. So while like, yes, they are a leader, it's really frustrating because I don't know who's behind the docuseries. I don't know if it's like a Christian organization, or like Christianity Today is the one that came out with the rise and fall of Mars Hill. But like that's the goal of that was pretty much like to tarnish the reputation of Mark Driscoll and to really put a stain on any kind of experience that could have came from that church. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know whose intentions were behind the docuseries, but clearly their goal was to like tarnish reputation. But that's what's really frustrating is like you obviously like need to like address the facts, and you obviously like if things like that are happening within the church, like sexual misconduct, like any kind of harassment, those kind of things, they need to be brought to attention. Like absolutely. It just sucks when the way that this can get interpreted by the world can really put a damper, so to say, on the perspective that people have towards church. Like, what do you guys think people watching that are going to think about Christianity, like going forth?
Well, yeah, that's what's hard. I feel like is like when you go to church, there is this, they're on it. First of all, they're on a stage.
Mm-hmm.
That right off the bat, they're already above you, right? They're talking at you, to you. They're not like, it's not like this like shared microphone. We're all going to talk. They're already seen as knowing more, having more. It wasn't until I think 3 years ago that I realized pastors don't have Bible verses memorized. It's just on the screen and they're reading it. So that was a harsh reality for me.
Well,
Some
that's not.
do.
Yeah, that's not necessarily
Okay.
true.
Well, sorry. But I feel like if every pastor got up there and was like, hey, before we start, let me just tell you my sins. Let me just tell you I'm not perfect. I'd have a lot more respect. People would have a lot more respect for like, okay, he's not that perfect person, because this is what happens. And it's our fault too. Like, it's not on them saying these people do this. We pick a poster child. We do pick like a poster pastor. Like, that's just what happens. And that's really not good. Because again, like, are we following them or are we following Jesus? Like, that's such a hard, because he's perfect in every way. You're never going to be able to find a flaw on him. You can find a flaw of every single pastor everywhere. You can find a flaw in every human, like you said, Remy. But I feel like that's like what's really tough is like for a non-believer, if they're like, oh, look at that. Like, you Christians are so hypocritical and you do this and this. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're not perfect. We shouldn't claim to be. And if someone has, I'm going to say they're not for them. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But imagine the different experience if every pastor just started with stuff that they've done. Like JP, even on his podcast, multiple times talks about his bad past with women, with whatever. I'm not going to say drugs or alcohol because I can't really remember, but with women
Everything.
specifically.
Yeah.
Literally
He's
everything.
honest. And that on the podcast, I was like, okay. Because you know what? That's better than a girl coming out and being like, oh, that guy on the podcast actually like saw him at a party. We did stuff. Like, it's so much better coming from JP than from a like female. Like, he just lays it out there, which I respect. Anywho, that's me.
Yeah, that's good. I think the documentary as a whole is very interesting, because you talk about how people are going to look at the documentary and be like, oh, look at those hypocrites, you know. And at the end of the day, like, people want to watch something that makes themselves feel better about how put together their own life is, right?
Right.
That's why the documentary is going to dramatize and point out the absolute worst things about the church. And I think that there's something to be said about what you're talking about is transparency, and being beyond reproach. You know, we're reading Titus for men's group. I listened to it a few times and read it once, and the standards that it's a letter where Paul is writing to Titus about the church and overseers and deacons and the standards that they're supposed to uphold, and it's amazing the things that he writes about. If people who are overseers and leaders and pastors of the church were held to the same standard that Paul is writing about to Titus, really big things like this, I don't feel like would happen as often. And so it's like the structure of a church like Hillsong that allows the charisma of a person to be greater than their character, to outweigh their character, and that's why they get put on stage, as opposed to their character outweighing their charisma. It just leads to bad things happening, you know, and there's like a part of us that we want that poster child. We want that charismatic person to lead us. You know, we're going to talk about in another episode about what church do we choose to go to. A lot of Christians today are going to choose a church that makes them feel good. They're going to choose a church that is basically giving them a TED talk and not really an exegesis or a sermon that convicts them and tells them to change their ways.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to go to a church that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Hillsong is really, really good at doing that with their music. It's not that that is inherently bad, right?
In the free cup and Bible you get when you go for the first time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So
That's how they get them right there.
Sold.
yeah, you know, and so like we have a natural tendency to look towards people who we think are perfect because we want to be perfect too. But in reality, no one is. And so having that reminder and that understanding that no one is important.
Yeah, I think of like, this might be a dumb analogy, but I think of like,
It's stupid.
think of like the most boring monotone like teacher or professor that you've had like in your life.
Oh God.
And think about like how, like I have one like that I had in like my Christian studies classes that was like, he was teaching me like straight from the Bible. Like everything he said was true, but like just because he wasn't, you know, what I saw on Instagram or what I saw from like, you know, megachurch pastors, like it just automatically turns us off to like, oh, I don't prefer this. Like I don't like this. I'd rather hear from somebody else. Even though like the living word of God was speaking through him, which is crazy to think about, like how we prefer those things and how we've been conditioned to like want those things over the, like, I don't know. It's crazy to me to be like this man, like, or this woman, like this teacher of whatever class or whatever, you know, they're teaching the word of God, but it's like, that still doesn't like, you know, do anything for me, you know, and not that everything is tied to emotions, but it's like, you know, how often are we just like, oh, this guy is boring. Like, could I go to a church now and be like, you know, this lead pastor is teaching me, you know, foundations of like the Christian life and everything he says is true and biblical, but it's like, I'd prefer to be somewhere else because it makes me feel better. The guy, you know, he jokes more, like he relates, he wears different things. It's like, okay, how big are we? Like, what are we actually weighing? And like, what is our foundation? And it's just like, it's crazy that even the things that we prefer and the things that we would rather have, even though, you know, what we really want and what we really need is foundationally different.
I wish there was more emotion in the text to know how like Jesus spoke, you know. I wish he had emojis. He just tell you how he was really feeling, you know, like when he was talking to the 5,000, like was he like screaming and hollering and making jokes with them and stuff, or was he just monotone or in between?
Just imagine after like Jesus says something, it's the emoji where it's like, like, you know, like in the Bible, it was like, just imagine it says something he said, and then it was like, Jesus wept. It was like, that'd be so silly.
No, yeah, that does make it hard though, because you obviously don't want a monotone speaker because you really will disconnect,
Fall asleep, literally.
Literally, I used to go to,
Nap time.
and this is not against Catholics in the sense that like, you guys
we're talking about mass.
But listen, I went to private Catholic school for years and years, and I went to mass, and it quickly became nap time because everything was just monotone. Like there was nothing to like engage me to, and that could be because we're conditioned today because of everything else around us that's entertainment that like fits to those needs and like our personal desires, or if that's just because, you know, that really is like how we work physiologically wise, and that's how we connect with people and how we retain information and that kind of stuff. And so if that's like how God wired us, or if it's how the world has wired us, so I don't really know. But regardless, yeah, when you let that become the forefront of the attention, where the experience is in the way that they talk and the music they play and they put in the music, like when I see churches sometimes like put music behind them when they like start to make their final point, and it's to like emphasize their point.
Oh, that's
it
so
kind of
funny.
makes me cringe.
The girl on the piano comes back out, and you're like, "What is Karen doing over there? And she's like,
Yeah, but it's like 10 minutes before the end of the
Oh,
service too.
yeah.
It's not just like they're like getting ready to start worship. It's like 10 minutes before, like as they're getting their final points. It's like they just want to nail it home. So it's stuff like that where
It's effective.
but it
yeah,
works.
it works. And but that's what's scary is that if that becomes the motivating force for how you communicate, then it can be really easy to compromise on those values of, well, you know, people really like the way I spoke the last service, and that's because I didn't really talk about these things, and because, you know, I added some music in and like really drew on like the story and the emphasis and like my tone, all those things, and then you just want to no longer want to talk about the other
You're
hard
telling
things.
me you think when Jesus gave sermons, he didn't have someone on a harp plucking away as he was finishing it up? Tell you right now, we don't know.
Judas, stop it now. Judas, I haven't
Judas,
hit my
not
main
yet.
point yet.
I told you 2 minutes before I was done.
Judas, we haven't done communion yet. Stop it. I told you I'd wave you on. Apparently that's Jesus' voice. I'm so sorry if that was sacrilegious. Just
If you
is.
do a heresy horn, it goes away. All right.
what?
It's like a backspace to everything you just said. You never heard of heresy horn?
No, that sounded
is that?
demonic.
Heresy horn. If you're saying something that's
Heretical?
it deletes it.
It deletes.
Okay.
That's
Uno
interesting.
reverse
That's
to
funny.
Jesus, you know?
So do you guys think, I mean, so on the positive side, I guess if we want to call it positive, like it's flushed out a lot of the toxic things that have been going on within Hillsong that are clearly there.
It's
right?
called them out.
It's
Maybe
called
hasn't
them out.
flushed them
Right.
yet.
I think, well, I mean,
Let's
a
hope
lot
it
of them
does.
have resigned, have moved out of churches. They have obviously, like, if anything is happening within it, it's either going to come out or it's going to get squeezed out, like one way or another. I don't know why Allie didn't
Squeezed.
like
It out.
that.
squeezed out. Why?
I didn't like that.
But yucky. But on that side, like it obviously does. It brings awareness to like some of the things that I would agree about, saying that, you know, and obviously like when you talk about like doctrine and your methodology, like those are two really big topics of how a church should operate and how they should communicate and how they should run. And when you see a mega church that operates like a business, like you can get a little skeptical because it's like, all right, is your goal converts for the church or is it disciples, right? Like, did Jesus like get more and more bigger crowds together, or did his crowd get smaller the more he spoke truth? And so that's where it can get really tricky when we talk about like mega churches, which we talked about before. We talked about hype churches
Yeah.
a while ago, and people really like that episode because it really brings to light the idea of like, okay, well, does my church actually do these things? And is it because they really want to lean into whatever's popular in culture today and want to stay culturally relevant? There was a video I watched that did, his name's Ruslan, I think. He did a video where he talked about the Hillsong situation. He talks about a lot of like recent news, and he's a big guy of faith.
Christian rapper.
Christian, is he a Christian rapper too?
That's how I knew him for years.
Really? I
Yeah.
didn't know he rapped. I thought he knew a bunch of rappers.
Yeah,
That
he's
makes
good.
sense. Well, anyways, he talked about it, but he brought up the example in 1 Samuel. I believe it's either 1 or 2 Samuel, about how the Israelites said, we want a king. Like God said, I will dwell among you and be with you. But they said, no, give us a king like these other nations. But like when you have a king, the king is treated differently than everyone else. The king gets the highest stand. The king comes in and does his speech or whatever, and then he leaves with the security and he goes back to his palace and he stays in that place and he gets extra treatment, more special treatment. He gets, you know, all of the money and all those kind of things. And so, you know, the people of Israel decided that that's what they wanted. They wanted to be like the world, to do those things. But then Saul becomes the king of Israel, and where do you see his downfall is because he was driven by his ego. He was driven by his own image and what he could get from it being the king, because it was all about him, right? And like very, very similarly in the position of Carl Lentz, it seems like they were, you know, we want someone that can relate with the world, that can connect with like people that the outsiders are going to see and they're going to be attracted to come into, because we want to be like them in that sense. And they've chosen that, but because they chose someone who could fit that quota of, we need someone who can stand out as an image, that can be someone that's like the world, that can be popular. And when you put someone in a position like that, it can be so easy for the devil to find a foothold, to get you to sin, to make a mistake. But like, it seems like he was really working in this whole like scheme of like, I just want there to be downfall, because everything that's driven by ego and by personal like self-image is going to end in destruction. Like, that's just how it goes.
Pride comes before the fall, brother.
Pride comes before the fall. And so that's like exactly what we're seeing, in a very similar sense to what the Israelites saw with the fall of Saul. I just thought that was really interesting how he kind of related it to that, because like history repeats itself. It just kind of does the same thing. And that's where you have to be like super careful. And this isn't to say, again, like this isn't to say that like all of Hillsong stands for, like everyone within the congregation stands for all. Allie, what are you doing over there? Sorry, guys. She's fighting with her microphone.
You know, when you tell yourself, like, all right, you have to be quiet. And then you end up, like, dropping something. That's, like, what I did. I was like, all right, don't hit the mic. And my hand was like, anywho.
I'm going to emphasize that sound effect. Now I lost my train of thought. No, I didn't.
No, I don't.
Thank
I
you,
didn't.
Allie. No, I didn't. Not everyone within Hillsong obviously stands behind Brian Houston's actions, Carl Lentz actions, those kind of things. And so that's also really frustrating. And that breaks my heart, because I think there's a lot of really good people within Hillsong that do desire to grow the kingdom, to experience.
I would say the majority too.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy how it's like, and obviously it makes sense that, you know, the leaders, you know, if they fall, everything kind of gets filtered through that.
Totally.
But like there's probably so many good Christian people who are devoted to Christ,
right,
and who are devoted to, you know, the kingdom of God. And also like there's probably so many people who have found Christ because of that church, because of the other churches.
Yeah.
And so, but that stuff won't get talked about like now, which is obviously a huge thing that is very sad, you know. But that's why like we need to have some, you know, so much accountability for leaders like that, because it ultimately, like we witness to Christ, like we are bearing witness to what he's done and who he is. And so when stuff like that happens, ultimately the world sees that differently, which is the biggest ramification, I think, of all of this.
Absolutely. Yeah. The hardest part is that they became a brand, and because you become a brand and you act as like a company or an entity beyond that of a church, you care about your reputation. And so when things like allegations come up, you're going to do whatever you can to like hide those or push them aside or keep them on the DL and like, hey, let's handle this properly. But the problem is that like they would handle the problems, but they wouldn't like help the people who were probably hurt by it. Like if someone was hurt by someone within the church, which there's multiple testimonies of it in this docuseries, like their experience is that like the church didn't really like help them in this. They just kind of handled the situation. And so they didn't feel like they were loved in that. And so like a lot of people were hurt by the church, and that's why they left. But again, like every church has this. Gosh, I could go for hours about churches that I know that have hurt me, and other churches that have hurt other of my friends that have just done horrible things. Like it's everywhere. But for whatever reason now, I think that there's going to be some ramifications against the church where the world, because that's what sucks, is the world is drawn to this kind of stuff. They want drama. They want to hear all the tea because, like you were saying, it makes them feel better. It makes them feel like they're on top of the world, that they don't make mistakes, that how could they do something like this? And it's like, imagine God made a docuseries about you and every sin you committed against him.
Tough.
Like, yo, you're getting put on trial. And the world's not going to forgive you. He might because of Jesus.
I would simply pass away. No, thank you.
Allie would just fall on her microphone and die.
Simply pass away.
And so, yeah, it's this, the whole situation sucks. And so my heart goes out to anyone who's within the church that hasn't been hurt by the church and really didn't anticipate this to be the response. But the hopes is that like the perspective that we can keep as Christians on this is less of a how could they, I can't believe them, and just judgmental, pointy towards Hillsong of like, oh, you go to Hillsong, oh, you're like one of those people. Like that's such a horrible and immature way to handle or interpret the situation, because there's so much more to it than that. There's so many good people within Hillsong that I know that like would be on the same side as us about all this stuff. These things sucks. You know, these things suck. And like we have to be Like, because I know that this docuseries is going to keep growing and people are going to find out about it and they're going to talk about it and be like, yo, if you hear about this, like what's going on and stuff like that. Like that was everything with Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Unfortunately, we didn't talk about it at the time. I didn't really think it was our style of podcast to talk about these things, but I think it's good to start doing that. But like we have to maintain the perspective that like all of us have mistakes and have
Everybody makes mistakes.
Everybody has those days.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Everybody gets that way. Yeah, sometimes I'm in a jam. I gotta make a plan. It might be great. Anyhow.
Nice little intermission.
I want to make sure you're still with us.
But yeah, so that's all I got on my heart. I think I had other questions, but I think that really just covers most of it. If you guys hear stuff about Hillsong, if you guys learn new things about Hillsong, like take everything with a grain of salt because you never know what is true and what's not. Because a lot of the intention behind these companies and these journalist entities, like it's all ill intention. Like it's all to destroy reputations because that's what gets the most views. Rise and Fall of Mars Hill was the #1 podcast on like anywhere on like the Christian like genre for like weeks and weeks and weeks, which is ridiculous when it came out. But that's because it's drama. It's because
like,
everyone wants to hear what's the tea inside the church.
For those who are believers, like we don't need to ruin or like help tarnish like people who make the mistakes. Like they like their decisions have done that. Like and most of them know like the consequences of their decisions now. The hope is that they would measure those things out before they make bad choices. But like hold your tongue like before we start joining on what the world would like to do to like the church, because that doesn't help at all. Like the first thing we need to do is be still and like pray that like the Lord would work through this still, and he will, but like it doesn't help when the church is also bashing the church. And obviously there needs to be accountability, but there's a difference between trying to rebuild like that foundation and build on the things that were good about Hillsong, and churches that deal with the same thing. But it's like you can't just be name calling and blaming and all of these things.
And like even like Remy said, like genuinely think about like if God did do that, like if every time you messed up, if there's just a siren that went off and explain what you did, but instead he gifted us with the Holy Spirit to move inside of us and be like, hey, don't like that.
No.
Like think the Lord that exists above a siren that goes off. It's like, oh, Allie just did this. And everyone's like, Allie. And I'm like, thankfully that's not the case. But like, that just proves Connor's point of like accountability needs to exist. But like, obviously the heart posture behind writing an article and like making a documentary, completely tearing apart the people in the church. That doesn't sound too nice. Some of that to me, I would simply pass away.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't finished the docuseries yet. I'm still working through the last episode, but I don't anticipate the end of the episode being like, but hey, we forgive Carl.
Hey, stop on by next Sunday and we'll see you there.
Lols. I doubt they're going to be like, hey, but we forgive the hurt that's happened to us because Jesus went to the cross for me too. And we would just want to encourage you guys, like, if you're still at Hillsong, stay committed to a church and your congregation and, stay loyal. Understand that there's a bigger picture. All these, like, they're not going to say that. Like, not even close. It's going to finish with like, and this is why Hillsong fell. Because of all of the crap that they did against these people. Like, these are their testimonies. Like, Law and Order style victims unit. We're all victims to things at times. Like, and that's not to like make light the things that we've been hurt by. Absolutely not. No. But like, like I don't want to sound heretical if this sounds heretical, but to say like Jesus is the victim, but like we offend Jesus and we offend God every single day with mistakes, and he still chooses to forgive us. Literally on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them for they do not know what they do.
Yeah, Jesus is the atoning sacrifice for our sins. So when we sin, he is the one who sacrifices his blood and his body to cover us.
Yeah. But we somehow really miss that part all the time when other people offend us and we think that we have a right to hold that against them and then blast them because, man, if people that I've hurt in the past got on a stage and started talking about me, I'm over. Like, I'm hiding in a turtle shell for the rest of my life.
He would simply pass away.
I would say, what is this with simply passing away? Whatever.
I'm trying to get it started.
Let's make it a thing, everyone.
Simply passing away. And another
It's
recent
like that
news.
guy. Remember that Vine? He's like, and then he like fades.
Yeah. Yep. I do remember that. I'm just gonna edit you out when you do that. I'm gonna fade you out.
In like 4 different frames. You know.
You're just gonna disappear. But no, yeah. So with that being said, I hope that was some perspective for you guys on everything that's been going on with Hillsong. There's obviously more that might come out. Obviously, there's churches that are separating and creating their own churches outside of these congregations now, or outside of the organization, still the same congregation. There's going to be a lot more to this, but I hope that adds some perspective to you guys on how to respond to that biblically, and how to kind of go about having conversation about it. Because it can be super easy to get into a conversation with someone who's just be like, can you believe everything that Hillsong did? And it's like, can you believe what you've done against Jesus? Like, welcome to the world. It's full of sinful people. Where's your grace? Have accountability, absolutely, for leaders. But like, what is this? Are we like on Teen Drama Island?
Total drama.
Good one.
Total Drama Island. Is that what it was called?
Teen Drama Island.
Idiot, you mispronounced it.
No. I just thought that was funny. I thought that I just think Teen Drama Island. Who wants to go? Pack your bags. It's like, that's so funny.
Sounds fun.
Anyways, we love you guys. Is there anything else you guys want to add before I end of this episode?
No.
Praise the Lord, brother.
Amen. Praise the Lord, brother.
Accountability, transparency. Let's get it going.
And
Simply passing away.
Simply passing away.
If you feel like, you know, the pastors should be held to a certain standard, but you don't want to invite that standard into your own life as well,
Go off.
then you should, you know, just be mindful of like, oh, I understand they're putting themselves in that spotlight. They're the ones that should be holding themselves, like putting those things in place to be held accountable and held to a certain standard. But as believers, we're all to be held to another standard that's different than the world. And, you know, if you're going to be like, oh, look at them, like they fell because they didn't have accountability in this area, that, like, why would you expect yourself not to fall in similar ways if you also don't have those measures in place? So be mindful of that too.
Yeah. And you could easily say, oh, I would never do that. Like,
Yeah.
I would never do something. Like, no, don't even. Like, the enemy comes after those who have influence, who have a position where it's a threat to his kingdom, and he's going to tempt you in ways that you've never thought you'd be tempted, and in the times when you are in your weakest moments. So don't think that you're above and beyond temptation and your flesh, because it's a constant battle that we're facing. You might be really strong in it, but like, you could have one really bad week or one really bad year of just not feeling as connected. And that could be exactly the case of Carl Lentz, where it just was a building up of a lot of issues within his own life that just led to those moments where he just made that one wrong decision. And then once you're in it, like, sometimes you're just stuck and you don't know what to do. And that's just the reality of how it is sometimes. So,
But
yeah.
Jesus always
But
provides a way out.
Jesus,
The big butt, baby.
the best butt
Jesus.
in the world.
Anywho.
Cringy pastors. I like to emphasize the butt.
This one of the biggest butts in the Bible.
Biggest.
I tell you what.
We love Bible butts.
Hey, see you next
They all
time.
do it. All right, we love you guys. We'll catch you guys. Oh, wait. You need to take a second. Go to the Spotify app. Find the little star button.
Venmo, Connor Medea.
Leave us a review. Just give us a little 5 stars. Super easy. Just boop. Right there. 1, 2, 3, done. Bam. Leaving us a review helps us to get this content out to other people so we can try and make a more bigger impact. That was a weird way to
Try
say
to
that.
make a more bigger impact.
Oh, thank you for emphasizing, Connor. If you guys want to support us in other ways, you can head to our shop at askuswhyshop.com. What are you doing?
It's just the app.
Oh, cool. I was like, are you showing a meme or something?
Click the star and
Um,
rate the stars.
Yeah, if you want, you support us at our shop. We just dropped our Fishers of Men design with some other stuff, and those guys popped off. Very, very limited whenever we do get them back in stock. And the last time we sold out of our white in 24 hours, and we're almost out of navy again too. And that's because I replenished the navy, even though we sold out of them within like 8 hours too. So anyways, point is, we got some popping stuff in the shop, and if you want to support us,
We're kind of a big deal, okay?
we're kind of,
Kinda.
guys, we got shouted out by JP.
Kind of a big deal.
Thanks, JP.
Kinda.
Thank you.
Kind of huge. That's kind of dope. Shout out, Bo.
Big fan.
Thank you.
He's watching this. All right, we love you guys. Catch you guys in the next episode. Peace out.
So yeah.